Hey guys, this is And the Writer Is, and I'm your host, Ross Golan. I've written with hundreds of writers and artists over the years, and my favorite part of each session is the first hour when we catch up about life and the industry, politics, composition, whatever. If you ask me, songwriters are some of the most worldly and intelligent people I've ever come across. So this is a journey of learning why people write songs, how people write songs, and most importantly, who the people are who write the songs. Now, I'm co-producing this with my friend Joe London, who was nominated for a Grammy earlier this year for Best Country Song. He makes us sound like angels. If you want to listen to the songs we discuss in this podcast, go to Spotify and look up our playlist, And the Writer Is, or go to our website, www.andthewriteris.com. Oh, and if you enjoy this podcast, please rate us on iTunes or whatever your preferred podcast listening site is. Today we have a very special and somewhat different episode of And the Writer Is. A few months ago, I moderated a panel for the Songwriters Hall of Fame titled The Art of Collaboration, Songwriters and Music Publishers Making Music and History Together. If you're not familiar with the Songwriters Hall of Fame, they're an organization dedicated to shining a spotlight on the accomplishments of songwriters who provided us with the words and music that form the soundtrack of our lives. Each year, they induct a slate of songwriters voted on by their membership in recognition of that year's most important works and accomplishments. Being inducted to the Songwriters Hall of Fame is truly an honor. Out of the thousands of successful songwriters of our era, there are currently only 400 that have been inducted. The Hall of Fame not only celebrates these established songwriters, but is also devoted to the development of new songwriting talent through workshops, showcases, and scholarships. If you're a songwriter or music industry professional, you should definitely join the Songwriters Hall of Fame. They sponsor great year-round workshops, showcases, scholarships, and other initiatives like this special event that we recorded for this program. Go to songhall.org to learn more and sign up to join. Now let me set the scene for you. On an evening last October to a packed house in the Clive Davis Theatre at the GRAMMY Museum in Los Angeles, a panel consisting of 3 of today's illustrious and award-winning songwriters and their respective publishers shared stories about their personal and professional relationships. That included Jack Antonoff and his publisher, Jen Knoepfle. That included Dan Wilson and his publisher, Kenny MacPherson, and Bonnie McKee and her publisher, Scott Cutler. Finally, I want to thank the Songwriters Hall of Fame President and CEO, Linda Moran, and Hall Committee members Barbara Kane, Mary Jo Manella, Casey Robinson, Kathy Spanberger, Rebecca Alperin, Tom DeSavia, and Donna Cassane for putting this very special event together. So without further ado, recorded live from the Songwriters Hall of Fame, here is And the Writer Is. Welcome to the Art of Collaboration panel. It's presented by the Songwriters Hall of Fame and the GRAMMY Museum. And I am your host, Ross Golan from the podcast, And the Writer Is. Our first writer and frontman has crafted #1 songs for both as an artist and a writer. In 1998, his band topped the modern rock chart. In 2007, he won a Grammy for Song of the Year. And in 2012, as a producer, he won a Grammy for Album of the Year. He's the writer that record labels go to when they need that timeless song. From Minneapolis, Minnesota, this Harvard graduate is not just a musician, he's the industry's most outstanding calligrapher.
Is that true?
And that's true.
Really?
And the writer is one of my favorite humans, Dan Wilson. Next to Dan is his publisher, who has been his publisher since 1994. In that time, the two have moved from Warner Chappell, where they shared Grammy-nominated Closing Time by Dan's band, Semisonic, then to Chrysalis Music, where they shared Grammy winners Not Ready to Make Nice by the Dixie Chicks and Adele's #1 record, Someone Like You. And most recently, they've moved to his company with that he co-founded, Big Deal Music. This man left Scotland before Brexit was cool, and the publisher is one of the industry's nicest, Kenny MacPherson. Yeah. Our second writer has not only developed her own artist career, but has been instrumental in the development of many others' artist careers. She's written 10 number one songs and has received a Grammy nomination for Song of the Year. She's written with the titans of the music industry because her lyrics are unmatched. From the Pacific Northwest, this writer's ambition is enviable and undeniable. And the writer is the only person I've ever written a song with in the Nashville's Delta Lounge, Bonnie McKee. Now, the man next to her has been next to her since the beginning. He created Pulse Recording in 2007 and signed Bonnie shortly after. They've enjoyed some of the biggest songs ever on Top 40 radio, including California Girls, Teenage Dream, Last Friday Night, Part of Me, Wide Awake, Roar, and Dynamite. Now, he's different than most publishers because he was a hit writer first. He's also Grammy nominated and wrote Natalie Imbruglia's Torn, which was number one for 14 weeks. If you ever need a straight answer, this guy will tell you how it is. And the publisher is Scott Cutler. Our third writer is a brand. As a frontman, he scored a number one song on alternative radio. As a lead guitarist and co-writer, he crafted one of the iconic albums of the last 10 years. And as a writer-producer, he's won Grammy Awards and received 2 Golden Globe nominations. From New Jersey, this entrepreneur is philanthropic, socially conscious, and most importantly, funny. I mean, he hosts a telethon. That's true. And the writer is someone who still owes me the Fun CD, my friend Jack Antonoff. His publisher has followed him since his first notable band, Steel Train. She was a fan of Fun since Aim and Ignite, the album before the one Jack owes me. Since Jack and her have been together, they've celebrated Grammys with Jack as an artist, but also have had hits like Brave for Sarah Bareilles and Out of the Woods for Taylor Swift. If the courting phase of a publisher-writer relationship is an indication of how their working relationship will be, then this publisher proves she'll do anything for her writers. And the publisher is Jen Knoepfle. And that's it. I'm just kidding. Okay, all right, so just to clarify, the first time I wrote with Jack was in a small room at Warner Chapel, right after Glee's version of We Are Young, and before the Chevy spot in the Super Bowl of the band doing it. So I hadn't heard the band's version yet. So my question is, as a publisher and a writer, how does a song go from the studio to all of a sudden Glee and Chevy before it's ever really been released on an album? How did that happen?
That happened because I guess John Janik, who was A&R in the record, just played it for. I guess that happens specifically. It's not a good story. He just played it for someone. But the interesting story, which is what you're getting at, is how does it happen? Which is someone hears a song and they think, oh, this would work for this. Because I think that people who in film and television know from the industry who just like fires out a million songs and who actually thinks and is like, this could work. And so he heard that song and he wasn't like just like sending everything to Glee. He was like, oh, this actually sounds like a, you know, the melody is very, would work for Glee and lots of people harmonizing with it, et cetera. So it was, and I think that what you're getting at is how you get those results. And it's when things are specific and pointed. This would work for this. You know, sometimes you might hear a song that would be great in this type of movie, or if someone's going to make another movie like Drive. Right. There's music for that. There's music for Fast and Furious. There's music for cartoons. So you just thinking about it. He thought about that. He was like, this is a good idea.
When Glee happened...
Actually, the untold story about that song is that Kanye and Jay-Z had it.
What?
No one knows that. It never got discussed.
But go back to like when it was written. Okay, so where are you when you're writing this?
So Fun was... So to bring Jen into it, Fun was like an indie band that, a couple hundred people would come see. And so we thought we were doing great and big publishers.
I thought you were doing great.
Yeah, totally. But we were not getting selling
It's just me,
records. There was no money involved.
To you, was that successful? Like,
Huge.
I mean, had it gone on that path?
Oh yeah, I thought
would you
Wilco
have
was the
been
biggest
totally
band in the
satisfied?
world.
Yeah.
I thought Spoon was the biggest band in the world, and I thought anything on the radio was so. I thought I was too old by the time before.
Musically, or
Just in general, I thought I had this antiquated view of the radio that it was for like 19-year-old goys. Yeah, it's I'm the first. Yeah, I was the first Jew to be on any radio. Definitely the first Jew with an alternative number one. I'm the first Jew to be on the stage. You're the second.
right?
So that's actually just a really quick, interesting story. So the band was totally unacquainted with anything mainstream. We all were. Jeff Basker was producing the record. We got his information because we loved Dark Fantasy, the Kanye record. He agreed to do it for very little money. He took the demo of We Are Young. He played it for Kanye, who was making Watch the Throne at the time. We didn't know any famous people. We didn't have anything to do with this. Kanye said, "This is great. I'm going to put it on Watch the Throne." And then we were like, "Oh my God, this is crazy!"
Wow.
And then we
Would
had
it
this,
have said like featuring fun? Or
we don't know.
It didn't matter.
I still actually have never heard it.
Oh, wow.
The only thing I've ever heard about it is someone told me who heard it, like somewhere at Rock Nation said that Jay-Z said, "I'm the king of Coachella" in his verse. I don't know if it's true.
You should get it and you should leak that.
I would love to. I mean, I don't know if I wouldn't do that, but so we thought
you should get it and then you should put it out legally.
But
it's a good idea.
It kind of is so crazy, that part of the story,
Yeah, no one
because
knows
literally, like, they almost gave it away.
Well, we thought when because I heard Jay-Z said it was too pop last minute.
Exactly.
Because it was on Watch Throne, they took it off, and we were devastated. We were like, that's
over.
Our career's over, and actually ended up being the best thing, but. It never had a flirtation with mainstream. So the truth before the Glee thing was, and what can happen a lot of times at labels and publishers is someone will notice a song, like a famous artist, and then everyone will notice a song. I'm having a situation like that right now. You know how it is. Like, you're like, this song's amazing, and no one gives a shit. And then like some big artist is like, this song's amazing, and then everyone else cares. So John Janik and Atlantic, they always believed in the song, but that was a big moment for other people. Like, hey, Kanye and Jay-Z like it, you should put it on Glee.
I mean, so it goes on Glee, and it's maybe a number one song on Billboard, wasn't it? Or Glee, or was it just number?
The Glee version
was number one on iTunes.
The Glee version went number one on iTunes
before the fun version, right?
Yes.
So did that scare you, or did that encourage you as an artist to know that the song's already a hit, or was it?
It was all icing on the cake. None of it was even. I was so uninvolved in the world that a lot of us live in now, where we think about if songs are going to be hits, we think about if they'll stay hits, if they'll connect. It was so pure. We just couldn't believe any of it was happening.
So when you were done with the song, you at that point the label was a part of it once you were finished with We Are Young, correct?
I didn't think the song was a hit because I thought the radio was dumber than it actually is. It's not that dumb.
Right, of course.
The that's part of what all of us on stage have to do is not believe people in the radio are dumb. When I was not involved with it, I just brushed it off like that's where crap goes, and that's not true. So I thought it was a smart song, and I was like, it'll never work. And so actually that being my first break or whatever, it was a wonderful lesson because it's a weird song in many ways.
It's great though. I like that song. Bonnie.
Yes.
You've had a lot of songs in the Super Bowl. You're sort of responsible for Left Shark. So I guess my question is, when you see a song being performed at the Super Bowl and you have, it's the halftime and you have multiple songs being played, are you watching and are you thinking, I should have picked that other lyric? Or are you sitting there actually thinking about the composition at all? And vice versa, when you're creating it, are you thinking that when I write the words roar, that Katie's going to be riding a paper mache horse in
I believe it was a lion, but
or it's a lion. I don't know. I guess it would make sense because it's roar and not neigh, right? They don't teach you that at USC apparently. I graduated early, but I never tell people my GPA. It's that thing. Anyway, so no, seriously though, when you're watching your songs on, in the Super Bowl, are you watching it though and actually thinking of the process and how you wrote it?
Yeah, I do. Every time I hear the songs that we wrote, most of my hits have been with Katy Perry. We're a great team, so it's not like I did it all myself. She's incredible in her own right. But yeah, there were things that we fought over. We fought like sisters, and sometimes we yelled at each other, and sometimes we cried, and sometimes we wanted to punch each other. But we're a great team, and we challenge each other. And so there were moments where I let her win or she let me win. And every time I hear the song, I think about those moments. And the things that I didn't like that made it, where I was like, oh, I wish we had changed this or whatever, become validated when it's a hit, where I'm like, she was right. Obviously, she was right.
Bonnie's relentless, though, about lyrics. And I've watched her do this for years. Every line is worked over, thought about, rewritten, studied.
It's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
I mean, I was gonna ask for you too. Is it when at being a writer who turned publisher? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Does it when you're when she who you when you hear a song that she sends you, do you think of it compositionally, or do you think of it as this is a song that my writer sent me? Is it okay?
No,
can you listen to it as a fan?
Yeah, I think I'm a fan at this point. I think the composition brain left me at one point, and I just listen. But with Bonnie in particular, Bonnie was the first person we signed to Pulse, so she was the first time I ever switched my role.
Sure.
And she came in with a ballad she wrote herself that was expansive and epic, and I didn't know this.
When was that?
This was 2008 or whatever.
Was that after your first record deal?
Yeah.
That was after. Okay.
So the Katy Perry couplet, every line, perfect. That wasn't. I had no idea that was coming.
Sure.
I didn't know how to do that yet.
No. I taught her how to do it.
Yeah, he taught me everything I know.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Every publisher.
No.
Kidding, guys. Y'all are cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know how to do that yet. I was just a baby songwriter, just a baby when Scott discovered me. And thank you for taking a chance on me, by the way, because I had a failed record deal under my belt, and I wrote all those songs. They were 100%ers, so I didn't know how to collaborate. It's just a lot of ego, whereas I wanted to say that I wrote everything myself, but now I can't even fathom writing something by myself. It frightens me because I don't trust myself. I feel like I need another brain in the room to bounce off of and tell me if I'm on the right track. So broken. And I'm so grateful. Actually, I met you back when I made my first album, and you introduced yourself. He introduced himself to me backstage like I didn't know who he was. But back in the day, when I made my first album, I was unpublished because I was like, well, I write everything myself, and I want to own everything myself, and I don't need a publisher and whatever. And I so wish that I had signed a publishing deal back then, because you were coming around and you were such a big fan and you were so cool to me. And I was like, oh, publishing, like I just should keep everything for myself. But publishers are your friends. They help you. They introduce you to people. They nurture you. And if I hadn't gotten a publishing deal, I wouldn't be the songwriter I am today. I'm really grateful to have learned everything that I did.
People have this idea like you don't sell your publishing. Like,
ridiculous.
No one sells their publishing.
No.
They make a decent deal where you get a partner for a period of time.
Yeah.
I think it must have been the Beatles, right, where that started that rumor. Didn't they, like, sell?
Yeah, to
my
us.
parents
I think it was
early on.
Beethoven.
Yeah, probably.
Actually,
that's like people
one of the
who...
first publishing deals ever done.
You're being
was for
serious?
Beethoven, yeah.
Not a bit. Wow.
Because I'm that old, I remember.
Yeah, fair enough.
But,
well, like my parents, who knew nothing about the music industry, like, whatever you do, don't sell your publishing.
Yeah.
It's like this concept where it's like, then don't give away a very small piece for a lot of help, and just enjoy, money, support all of it. No one really sells their publishing.
I say that every day.
Yeah, like have you ever bought someone's entire publishing who's alive?
No, and I definitely didn't do that with you. We have a pretty...
No, I sold all.
I would have done it.
He sold it for...
But I think that's a real
pennies.
thing that, as a student at USC, one of the things they teach you the value of publishing. So then you put a value to something that hasn't created any revenue yet. So then you feel like, well, what am I sell? I can't sell half my publishing or all my publishing because you're sort of taught that has the value. But in reality, none of the writers are on this stage without their publishers, and their publishers really had a lot to do with, which we'll get to.
Well, I must say that I wasn't able to sign Bonnie back when she had her first record deal, but my wife did get to take the most beautiful pictures of her as an artist, which I get to see still on a monthly basis because they're in my wife's portfolio, and you photograph beautifully. So I didn't get to sign your publishing. I'm delighted that Scott did, but I still get to look at you and go, why the fuck did I sign that?
I'm sorry, I didn't know yet how valuable that would be.
Kenny, when being that unlike Scott, you don't write music. How did you know in 1994 when you meet, Dan, who's in a band in the Midwest? How do you know that guy? I mean, you're in Warner Chapel, probably where were you, in London, or you were in New York? So why did you take a risk on this guy from the Midwest? What was it that he was showing you?
Well, I had sort of just moved to New York and started my first sort of corporate publishing job with Warner Chapel. I was on the road for many years and in management, and part of a management company, started a publishing company. And the band I worked with was Supertramp, and we had a deal with A&M Records, and I heard about Dan when he and his brother Matt had Trip Shakespeare. And so I was aware of Dan then and thought Trip Shakespeare was a good name, it was trippy, and then he's a Harvard man. And as I went to the University of Glasgow side streets, I thought I might learn something from meeting a Harvard man.
Right.
And I have. But, because I come from management, and really I'm a failed musician. I tried, and it just wasn't in my gene. That I was better at organizing the gigs than singing them, and learned that very quickly. So I've always just loved the sort of the mystery of songwriting. I'm fascinated by how songwriters create, and I love the fact that there's no creative rule book, and it just turns me on, and it still turns me on. So with Dan, I heard Semisonic's demos. I worked with a gentleman, John Tita, who I'd hired who was a musician and spoke that language better than me. And I've actually been successful partially because I've had good taste in people that work with me, be it John Tita, David Stamm, Casey Robeson, who just are musicians, have a feel, a sensitivity, and part of my job is to help guide them through the management of that process and how that works. But I'm a fan, so when I heard Semisonic's demos, and then when they were making the record, it just turned me on. There was something very Beatlesque, which obviously growing up with the Beatles I loved, but I just loved Dan's voice, his guitar playing, his lyrical sense. I wanted to go see it. It just was. And then I met him, and it's been a 22-year relationship where we've followed each other around and stuck together, and I think that's probably the best thing that you can have as a collaboration between an artist and, I would say we are creative people, obviously, but it's been a journey for both of us, and it's stimulating and still vibrant and exciting, and we've become personal friends, and our families are friends, and it's a joy.
So had you heard Closing Time in those demos?
No, Closing Time hadn't been written in 1994. It may have been written in Dan's brain, but he never said that.
When was it written?
1997. Maybe 97 or 96? Early 97 or late 96.
So when you're writing that, and I know the backstory, but if you could share the backstory of Closing Time a little bit. Why did you write Closing Time?
For several reasons at the same time. There was a song on Semisonic's first album called If I Run, which I thought was an amazing song. And
people didn't really notice it. And I asked a friend of mine who was a smart guy, what could I do with that? Like just my disappointment that no one noticed this great song. And he said, just write it again.
Yeah, that's really
I was
funny.
like, okay, that's cool. So that's thing one. Second thing was I had been living in bars for like 7 years, essentially because Trip Shakespeare had been on the road for, 100 to 200 nights a year for all that time. And so closing time was like the dominant metaphor of my life at that point. And then my wife and I were expecting a child. And because I didn't want to bum my band out with a song that was obviously about a kid being born, which would have bummed them out a lot because they were rock musicians and they don't want you sentimentally singing about having a baby, I hid the story of being born in the metaphor of being kicked out of a bar. Swear to God.
I mean, it's crazy, and then it ends up.
And
being,
I rewrote my other song, If I Run, and blah blah.
And then it ends up being played in every bar. I mean, there's one. It's one thing when you write a song that's a metaphor, and then it actually becomes the song that people play at the end of the night. Is pretty nuts.
My observation is that I mean, Jack is right about not underestimating people's intelligence, but when people group together in large groups, they don't understand metaphors. Once there's 1,000 people, that group, that each individual might understand a metaphor over coffee. Sure. But those 1,000 people as a group do not understand a metaphor. So it's all very literal.
I guess speaking of literal, and it's also a political year, so this is kind of interesting for this song. But not ready.
This is an awesome lead-in, by the way. Whatever you're about to do is super great.
I'm the best. Okay, so in a political year like this, you Not Ready to Make Nice, which came out in 2007, wins Song of the Year, Record of the Year, Duo of the Year, I don't know, everything of the year. Yeah. And it's a song, for those of you guys who don't know it, it was the lead singer, Natalie Maine from Dixie Chicks. She said in a concert, "We're ashamed that the president of the United States is from Texas." And all country radio stations banned that band. So they became the biggest band in the world. They were the biggest band in country, and then they were just off radio overnight because they said something that's true. So when she approached you with this concept, is that how that happened? I mean, how does somebody say to you, hey, I want to go in and write the song that says fuck you to radio, which is really hard to do. It's hard to go, and it's hard when we talk about, we grew up all thinking, oh, radio's where those songs go. And then once you live in the world, you realize how hard it is to get a song on radio, how hard it is to get a song to react on radio, and then to go to all the radio programmers and say, this isn't an apology. Is a really hard song, or is it an apology?
No, when I got together with the Dixie Chicks, it was kind of a blind date that Rick Rubin, their producer, put together. He and I were working on a couple things, and he introduced me to the Chicks. And obviously I'd known a lot about their political travails at that time. But when I got together with them, they played me a bunch of their songs, and I think sometimes we are not super objective about our own work. And they played me several of their songs that obliquely mentioned their troubles with the Bush administration. And they said, it was fun for me to just hear their works in progress. And then they, afterwards they said, we don't really want to delve into it anymore in our songs because we've gone into it too much already. And I said, no actually, no one's going to notice the references to their political struggle. They were just a little too subtle for people to really notice. And I kind of told them that we needed to write something that was really blatant. And then after some discussion with them, which was really pretty fruitful and which is kind of told in that movie, maybe at length, I won't go into that, but the next morning I had a lot of espresso. And
but he still has a lot of espresso in the morning. I
still drink a lot of espresso.
It's not special to that.
So, and then I thought of this phrase, "not ready to make nice," which is something that my prairie family might say. So I don't think of it as really a particularly country thing to say. But I sang it.
Envisioning your prairie family is awesome.
My prairie family, like little prairie dogs, yeah.
You know, Ross, funny that story too. I'd been obviously working with Dan for a long time then, and I was friends with the Dixie Chicks manager, Simon. And for 3 years before Dan got to get together with Dixie, I'd been going to Simon for 3 years. This is the frustration I'm sure Jen and Scott relate to. For 3 years, I've been telling him, you have to get the Dixie Chicks to meet Dan Wilson and write with Dan Wilson. You have to, like a broken record. And it was like, yeah, Kenny, right? Yeah, what's he doing? What? And I go, and then of course Dan's working with Rick. Rick tells the Chicks, "Oh, you got to meet Dan Wilson." Overnight it happens, and I go to Simon and say, that's
For the radio listening, you flipped off.
You said it's a podcast, so I was trying to bleep myself. I didn't know if it was HBO. Fuck you, Simon.
Sometimes that approach of the publisher, like banging on doors, actually works.
Sometimes.
I mean, you made like when I wrote with Dierks Bentley for the first time, that was you banging on doors, and that was it wasn't a crazy stretch, but it was certainly not the first thing that we thought.
So I was delighted.
Yeah, it was a number
one. Did it scare you when that song came out and there was a lot of controversy attached to that song? And my question is, did it scare you because one of the things I wanted to talk about next is sort of a big part of being a songwriter is branding you as a songwriter. You know, the way we people tend to come to us for certain types of songs or certain types of projects. And so when you have a writer that comes out with a song that's controversial, it's amazing, was there a fear that people like, I guess Dierks Bentley is the kind of guy that would want to write with that writer, but did it scare you at all that the brand of Dan would change in any way?
No, not at all. I mean, maybe there's certain other artists, writers, I don't know, the Dixie Chicks' biggest fan, Toby Keith, he might not want to get together with Dan, but I wouldn't discount it. I think that's the one of the fascinating things, and I think songwriters do need to challenge and do need to protest and do need to bring awareness to situations. And I think we cannot live in fear, and we should be courageous and stand next to them.
Yeah.
And
did kind of chill out my visits to Nashville for
a
like
minute.
5 years.
Yeah. I mean,
it actually made people kind of not
Yeah.
in country not want to write with me.
Yeah,
Wow.
It did. And
Good for
my
you.
attitude to them was "fuck you."
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
because
that's
I mean,
awesome.
it's going to turn
you're an
around.
artist.
You know, there was plenty of other things, and I mean, it's a brilliant song. They're fantastic musicians and songwriters and pivotal artists, and you know, you just got to take it on the chin and keep going.
Well, so the idea of branding a writer is important, and the thing I want to bring up to Scott and Bonnie is, you know, a lot of your relationship has been how do you brand Bonnie as an artist versus a writer, you know, and I think that's been, I guess I want to know how you do that, how you decide to write certain things as a writer versus as an artist, you know, and before you answer that, you know, I think, you know, in my opinion, as a writer, something like Teenage Dream is probably the best calling card any writer could have, you know, and I think that really brands you as a writer. And my question is, how do you differentiate yourself? And maybe you could tell the story of Teenage Dream and how you put yourself in that.
It's hard to differentiate because I have a pretty specific style of writing, which Scott has called couplets, which I had never heard before, but I guess that is kind of what I do. Matching little lines, like perfectly symmetrical little metaphors and things. And it's something that I've struggled with, honestly, because obviously everything that I did with Katy was co-written, and there's a lot of Katy in there, but
Teenage Dream, though.
Okay. Teenage Dream, though.
Get on to it.
Okay, Teenage Dream. I didn't finish high school. I was kicked out of high school in the 9th grade, and I missed out on prom, and I missed out on football games, and I missed out on all of that fun shit you see in the movies, and so I always kind of had an unhealthy obsession with it, and so before I met Katy, in my own work, I had a kind of an on-running theme of teenage, adolescent turmoil and new love. And I feel like I had been trying to write that song my whole life. And when I was put in a room with Katy Perry, Max Martin, Dr. Luke, Benny Blanco, I had the right tools to do that. And so originally, we wrote that song front to back 5 different times. 5 different versions of that song existed that were not Teenage Dream.
Wait, same title or different titles?
Different completely different lyrics. Like
but
completely different
same melodies,
concepts.
same.
The melodies were the same because Max Martin is the Swedish genius that wrote most of the melody. And so we knew that there was something magical there and the track was right and there was magic. We knew it. But we were just beating our head against the walls. And we wrote, the first version was like, kind of had that, the young thing where, we were talking about eating ice cream for breakfast and, trying to stay forever young was kind of the underlying theme, but it felt too young. And then we did something that was like, try me on. That was very like, dress you up in my love, like some kind of stupid sex metaphor with like shopping. It was very cheap. I'm not proud of it. And we just kept writing and writing. And then finally we kind of had to take a break from it. It was like a month straight, like every day going in, rewriting this fucking song. And then we took a break from it for a second, and I just I remember sitting with Benny Blanco, and he was like, "It's just not cool." I was like, "I know, it's got to be cooler." He was like, "Check out this thing. There's this band called The Teenagers, and they had a song. It's like some weird French band that's there's not even any singing. It's just them talking, and it was a couple of French kids talking like American Valley girls." They're like, "Oh my God." So like I went to the mall and like you would not believe like what she was wearing. And like it was like some completely random thing. And I just remember listening to it and being like, yeah, this is my shit. This is what I care about. This is what inspires me. And I thought about the word teenager and how much you can say with just one word. Like you hear the word teenager and it just paints a whole picture and it's very evocative. And I had these syllables. I had to fill in these syllables. And so I ended up with Teenage Dream. And then once I had the title, I was like, this is it. I felt in my gut. I knew it was it. I drove up to Santa Barbara and met up with Katy and Max and everybody. And I was like, guys, I think I got it. And they were like, we don't want to hear it. Because we had put together like an all right chorus. And they were like, just work on the verses. We don't want to hear it. And I was like, no, I swear. So knowing that I had this ace in my pocket, I was like, all right, I'm just going to write the verses to match this title because I know it's right. So Katy and I went in and I told her and she liked it. But we always had to run everything by Max and Luke. They were like the good cop, bad cop. And they had to approve it. And they'd often send us back with our tail between our legs.
Which one was the bad cop?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, boy.
Sorry.
Yeah, there it is.
I love bits.
Right.
No
Wrong.
comment.
See, that's my Donald Trump image. Go ahead.
So anyway, no comment. So we wrote these verses, and then when I finally came in and I was like, okay, listen, check it out. Teenage Dream. You make me feel like I'm living a teenage dream. And then Max looked at me and was like, well, why didn't you say so? I was like, oh my God.
That song's incredibly you, though. I mean,
Thank you.
of all, it sounds so belabored, but it sounds like you writing a song in 5 seconds to me.
Thank you.
I mean, that's your
That song and American Girl are like siblings.
Yeah, definitely.
They
Yeah, I
feel
feel like
like
American Girl was the sister song to Teenage
You feel that
Dream
way
for
too?
me. Yeah,
That's so
definitely.
cool. I always
Yeah.
thought that.
Yeah,
Here's a compliment. When I was in, I just went to a bachelor party with Max. No, he wasn't getting married. It was somebody else. But we were talking about songs that, favorite songs that people have written. And he says that that's his favorite song that he's ever written. And considering like his catalog, that's a pretty good compliment.
That's really amazing to hear. Max Martin is like my idol, and I still like, even after working with him for years and years, and having all the success with him, I still am starstruck every time I'm in a room with him.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like I learn something every time I write with him. Mm-hmm. So I'm really blessed and grateful to have been able to come up under him and Luke. I learned a lot from Luke.
Sure.
Like he was really, really hard on me, and I'm glad. I'm really grateful for that.
Scott, how do you encourage the different parts of a writer like Bonnie, where she's doing the artist, pursuing being an artist, pursuing being a writer? At what points do you say, hey, now you got to go in and do that kind of song, or you should do the, do you have
first
any...
of all, can you imagine me telling her what to do?
Right, I guess that's fair.
That's not how it
Right.
works. For me, it's I just try to be encouraging. I think writing music is a magical experience. Nobody up here really knows exactly how the ideas come, when they come. I listen to Beatles songs. They seem like they were written by God. I don't know how they could have been written. And I still look at it that way. So when I heard American Girl, I just, this is it. This is the song. We got it. The only suggestion I had was let's shorten up the second verse, which drove her crazy because she had these couplets.
I had a line about cars blowing up.
She had a couple of good
that
lines
I really
and
wanted
she had
to
to
keep.
shrink.
What
And
was
that
the
took
line?
days.
There was a line about, it was like something about, I want to blow up a car because I can do whatever the fuck I want because it's America. It's like a very American line.
It was
but
like Team America.
yeah.
But I don't get in there. I don't have the answer. I don't break it down. I just listen like a fan, and I think that was one of the very few suggestions I had in our whole life together of like make the second verse shorter. I don't know. Whatever the fuck that means.
All right, that's a note.
That's a good note, right? Speed it up. But and then with her artist thing versus her writing thing, it's just, I think the only thing I ever said to her was just live a creative life every day. Write some songs, the right one will come in the right day.
That's all you can really do is just show up and see what happens. And it used to be when I first started writing, I would come in always prepared and be like, okay, I have to have a title ready. I have to.
Very Nashville, by the way.
Yeah.
Be prepared.
Yeah.
It's Nashville, and it helps in the community that she's talking about in Santa Barbara, that those writers, you only have so many opportunities with those writers. And, publishers' jobs, if they're good, if they're introducing you to situations, and you walk in there and you have to write the song. So
and
it helps to be really, it
titles
helps to have something.
And I love titles. Like the first question is always like, what's it called?
Yeah. That's my favorite.
And I wish
question.
I had come up with Out of the Woods. But
It's that thing.
Oh, so good.
It's that
Such a
thing
great
where when
song.
people say, there are all these people who have songs where the title's not in the chorus, or the title's not, and they think they're being artistic by picking some random thing, and say, just don't
do that.
Don't do that. The first way of not getting your song cut.
That's funny. That actually happened to me. I had a number one with Cheryl Cole in the UK, and the chorus was very like straight ahead, and it was like, I don't care, and it feels so fucking good to say I don't care, or whatever. And I was like, I can't call it I don't care. And so my first line of the song was Waking Up Diagonal. And I was like, way better title.
Sick title.
But they changed it to I don't care, and I was pissed. I was so mad.
Think of it, if it was, I took a pill in Ibiza, number one song. If it's like sad song, it's like kill yourself.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, yeah.
Terrible. That was really aggressive. So anyway, Jack, one of the things that you have that's unique is that when I was saying in the intro that you have a brand as a writer, I mean that if I look at Brave and Out of the Woods and Better and a lot of these records, like I feel like I know you as a writer in a really intimate way. I think that's really hard to do. And I guess my question is like, let's talk about Out of the Woods. How did Taylor find you, and how did that come about? Did she find you as somebody who had done other songs? Did she know Bleachers? Did she know Steel Train? It sounds like a Jack record with Taylor.
Apologies to Jason Evigan, who's in the audience, who I told this story and the We Are Young story to today. So like he has to hear it twice.
He's a friend of the podcast.
Yeah.
He's been interviewed wherever he is. We like you, Jason.
It was a weird one because do you know the Tegan and Sarah record Heartthrob? So there's a song called How Come You Don't Want Me, which I did with them, which wasn't a single. It wasn't even really like a fan favorite. It was a favorite for
Great
us.
song.
Yeah, it was a great song in my opinion.
But it was. It was just
No,
sort
it
of
wasn't
a track
like
on a record.
it was single or not. Like
Yeah.
you know, because on albums there's hit singles sometimes. There's fan favorites. It wasn't bad. It was one of the songs. I was very, very proud of it. It was modeled after Only You. No, Mr. Blue by Yaz. That was sort of the sonic DNA of it. So she heard that song, and I think you'd been knocking at that door.
Yes,
also.
we've been knocking on the Taylor door. And that's actually to your point, like what you had talked about earlier. I think it's interesting when you talk about Jack as a brand or Jack from being an artist and how that sort of helped or hurt or whatever. But I think he is able to put himself in situations that I'm not going to be backstage at the Grammys, mingling with other artists. And I think we tried. I mean, we published Taylor, and we sort of were like pretty laser focused on getting him with Taylor because we knew that it would be this amazing explosive thing, but we didn't get very far. I mean, we sort of get to the right places. And
who do you contact? You don't call Taylor and say, hey.
No. I mean, yeah, we talked to Troy, who actually
Right.
signed Taylor, who's the head of our Nashville office, who's close to her, and her manager, and and it was all very positive,
Sure.
But what's great about someone like Taylor and someone like Jack is like they have their own ideas, and they're very they have them, and sometimes that's actually a better thing. So in this sense, you guys actually
we had met at things, and I was she was aware of stuff I was doing and whatever, thought it was cool. We just got to know it. You meet people at things like school or whatever. It's the same
Right.
feeling. And so I did that Tegan and Sarah song, and that was before I started Bleachers. So that song was the beginning of a phase for me that lasted probably like 2 years, which was very rooted in the feeling from John Hughes movies.
Yeah.
It was rooted in this idea. Vince Clarke, who actually ended up getting to work with a bunch, started Depeche Mode and Yaz and Erasure, and I kind of thought, well, this is sort of like he 30 years ago invented pop radio. It just sounded better then. Why did it sound better? Because, well, he wasn't using soft synths. He was using
it was all real.
The old stuff that's harder to use. And I thought, wow, Depeche Mode was so, from what I've heard, cutting edge and wild when they were out, and now that Depeche Mode ARP is every pop song. Like, how did that happen? And how do I get back to where it came from? And why is it that in the John Hughes movies, those songs, not just because for everyone, are just so emotional, make you want to dance and cry? To your point about metaphor and how smart people are or are not, my favorite songs, Closing Time is a perfect example, is ones that 1 million people can get drunk to and one teenager can cry to in bed. Dancing on My Own by Robin is probably the best example of all time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Alicia Keys, Try Sleeping with a Broken Heart. So that's the only barometer for me for a song. Was it me?
It was the synth.
It was fucking horrible.
Yeah.
I can't breathe. So that's the biggest thing. How do both those exist at the same time? We all, any writers, publishers. I mean, that's it, right?
Sure.
You want both, and when it happens, those are the biggest, best, most exciting. No one's ashamed to like them. John Hughes movies, those songs. So I was trying to think about that. I started Bleachers, that was in that theme, and we just caught each other at a great moment because she heard that Tegan Sarah song. It happened to be her favorite song. She was like, "Oh, you're the guy who did that," and I was like, "Yeah." And I have this whole idea about like just this moment. How do you modernize it? And then we did a bunch of songs together, and it was super easy because it was just. Sometimes you get references in their production and lyric melody. So it was Lynn drums, and it was Juno 6 arps, and it was Moog bass. There's specific things that were that DNA, and it was saying things that were super grand and having these huge choruses like Out of the Woods where you could just repeat it and sing it over and over. And then verses. Springsteen says the chorus is gospel, the verse is blues. I love that because the chorus is for everyone. That's I want to get better. 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 It could be like I want to get better at basketball. I want to get better at being less depressed. It could be anything. Everyone wants to get better. If your family was all murdered or if you stub your toe,
Still want to get better.
you have that feeling. And so then the
You
best
were darker
example.
than Ross.
Yes. Yeah, Kill Yourself was good.
Yeah, right.
The biggest inspiration, and you know the band The Mountain Goats? You never heard of them? Yeah, I'm not trying to do a thing where I like name an obscure band. Like, I don't think it's cool to like. It's just they happen to be obscure. They have a song, and the lyric in the chorus is, "I'm going to make it through this year if it kills me."
That's a great song.
Yeah, when I said that, there's not one person in this room who wasn't like, "Yep, right.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it through this year if it kills me." If they're here, they're a robot. And then the verse is about alcoholism, his stepfather beating him, all these things that I've never experienced. Right, but the song means the world to me because that's how I feel. So that's how, Are We Out of the Woods Yet? Brave, I Want to See You Be Brave. The song was about her friend coming out of the closet. I Want to Get Better. Like these songs that I feel very connected to just tying a song up in the chorus and then having the verse be so absurdly personal that no one else could have written it. Like literally talking.
It explains why those, Jen and I were talking the other day about how your songs, maybe more so than anyone that I know, manage to seem to fit a lot of different scenes because they're really positive in the chorus, or seemingly positive, until you listen and you're like, wow, that's really deep that Brave is actually... it was used in a lot of contexts outside of coming out of the closet. It was a Microsoft commercial. It's the idea.
I want it to be forever. I grew up in the 90s, probably like you, where popular music, when I said all that shit about radio, that was later.
Sure.
Early 90s, I turned on the radio and I heard the best songs that have ever been written. Still. Dan was a part of that. It's so cool. But it's amazing. Seriously, that moment, it wasn't because I was younger. It was because it was
better.
Fucking incredible.
You
would hear Smashing Pumpkins and you into Snoop Dogg on pop radio, into Pearl Jam, into Semisonic, into the Indigo Girls were on pop radio.
Yeah.
Toad the Wet Sprocket, Natalie Imbruglia, Melissa Etheridge. Like, shit made no sense.
Yeah.
I actually think we're heading closer towards that because you see radio, like, no one knows what's going on.
Well, it's because, right now there aren't aisles in stores. So, we grew up in a place where, at least if you go just after closing time in the sort of, sorry, Fred Durst, but the Limp Bizkit era.
That's when the world died.
It's like...
that's when it got. That's when it got cynical.
It came
back. But that's when we split off into indie and pop. That's when, because you remember that was the moment. No offense to that kind of music, but I was so personally upset by what was happening in the mainstream that I like adopted this, what later turned into Strokes culture in the early 2000s of like, fuck it. Like I'm in an indie band. I hate everything. I'm cynical. I'll never be on the radio. Major labels are sellouts. Like, I don't know what a publisher is even at this point in my life. And then it sort of came back around. But those of us who grew up in this amazing moment, and I think we're a similar age, we have this like hope where it's like, oh, the mainstream can be incredible. Yeah. You know this feeling.
Well, that was that was the time when Ben Folds would have a huge hit, and it was like, oh, the world is so great,
songs.
but it actually didn't last.
It didn't, but because
CDs were making a lot of money, and so it made sense to homogenize. I think when there's that kind of money, there becomes a feeding frenzy of we need boy bands. We need, hard rock, and the aisles become really strict, and radio becomes really strict.
Like,
and the art goes away, and it helps that now there's a playlist of just the top 50 songs, and whether I don't know what playlist this is, but if it's Let It Go going into One Dance or whatever.
Today's hits. Playlist.
Well, the funny thing is, I spoke to somebody today, and when you talk about formats, I grew up listening to BBC Radio, and they would play the Beatles, then Muddy Waters, then Perry Como, then the Stones, then it was like it was very broad and all over the place. And I was saying with playlisting now, and like the hope is that whether it's like if you asked everybody that's a songwriter up here, with your podcast that you're doing, let's make a playlist of the songs that the songwriters wrote. Let's make a playlist of the songs that inspired the writers. And then I spoke to one of the IPs today, and they said, yeah, well, the playlisting thing is we still want it to have some kind of format. And I was really disappointed that they said that. They still want to try and make you as the listener be driven down a lane. And I think that's wrong. I personally think it's wrong. I think, there's so much great music and diversity. You're putting everybody in a box.
Sure.
And it's boring as fuck.
We have a song Broccoli with Drum and Little Yachty. And when I first heard that song, it just made no sense at all to me. Like,
what about it made no sense?
Well, there's a feature. There's
I hate
5
broccoli.
things in a row.
There's like a
different
feature
and
in the
really great.
first verse, and he's not in the first verse, and then he's in the rest of the song. And it's one of those things that a label would never. It happened because it's of the way it is now. They just put it out and let people decide. And now sounds
That's
perfect.
a song with like 4 different aisles of the supermarket in one song.
Yeah, and so right,
exactly. In a great way.
Really well
There's-
put.
Yeah. So
It's so good.
That's a metaphor.
That's exactly what I've been thinking. I get it. They don't get it.
but
Too many of them.
But maybe that's what's good about now is that that song didn't have to get through the major label system in any way. It would never have worked.
Yeah.
It just they put it out. They were brave and threw it out there. People like it. Now the label can get behind it.
So
their
brave.
idea.
Yeah.
That was their idea.
Yeah.
About broccoli.
but
So
at
brave.
least
They were
it's-
listening to Sarah Bareilles.
But it's
and they're
creative,
Like, I
and
need
it's
something
different.
broccoli.
But
Be
you have
brave,
to.
eat broccoli.
Like what a great publisher could do, or people that are around you, is have an actual opinion. That's the sickness of the music business: is people with no opinion. The easiest way to keep your job at a label is to have no opinion. But the
Not
easiest
take
way
any
to do
chances.
something great is to have an opinion. You might get fired, or you might run the label one day, or a publisher. There's so many people that just don't want to go on record because if it works, they want the credit, and if it doesn't work, they don't want to. They want it off them. But it's like artists can't function and writers without opinions. I love it. I'm surrounded by people like Jen and my manager who will say like, this is it, this sucks, this is not, and then I have the ability to listen and have my own opinion. And it's a culture where people have a thought and they're not just, it's a smash. That is like
Right.
the most, I guess people don't really say that much anymore, but like,
No,
No,
but
I
the
do.
guy who has
still
the
say it?
shitty
I mean,
opinion.
they'd still say it.
It's you don't want the A&R guy who likes everything you do. You want the guy who likes
someone has
nothing you
opinion.
do and asks you to keep sending stuff.
I love Jen because she was interested in fun when it was worthless to a publisher.
Right.
So that's just a fact of our relationship. Separately from that,
I
wouldn't
liked you when fun was worthless. Also,
Yeah, but that's
Just for the
it's
record.
nice because she liked the first record that couldn't have made her money at her company, couldn't have made her
right?
exciting to like it was just a fan thing.
Yeah.
And so I thought,
Right.
okay, she gets the songs, and then if we can do this together, and if we think these songs and this style of work is great and can reach a lot of people, that's awesome. But how sick you experience all the time people with no opinion.
Yeah.
Everyone on the stage has had the experience. My least favorite thing that ever happens in music is when you're playing something to a group of people, and they're all looking around, and you're like, just someone.
Just
Say what you think.
Well, that's
close
You
your
can
eyes.
love it or hate it, because it's just for the people. They like it or they
Right.
don't, and we try to. This is what's happening on radio, streaming, blah. We try to figure everything out, but it's like when you hear a song, do you like it or you don't? Do you want to hear it again? Did you spend $100,000 in 2 years working on this version of the production, and you still listen to the demo?
Right.
Without the demo, it's so easy to say. It's so hard to do.
Do you
Can-
publishers run through that too? Oh yeah.
Can
go
I
ahead.
ask you a question of the publishers?
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
I tell a really short story and then ask?
I
you a
would.
question?
I would prefer that.
Okay. Sorry to bogart the process, but I had an interesting drive here with Kenny and my wife, and I got my phone magically hooked up to my car, so it played in the car, which was already amazing. And I played Kenny 4 new songs, one from today, and one from yesterday, and one that I hadn't heard yet from an artist that I'm working with who lives in Oakland, and one from a couple weeks ago. And I'm really prolific, and a lot of us, I'm sure everybody here is really prolific. And we listened to these songs, and I just, when I played Kenny, essentially, the 4th song, I just was like, shit, how do you deal with this? Because it's an onslaught. It can't be, what are you listening to, 25, 30 new songs a day? It's because it's not just me, obviously, overloading.
It's just you, Dan.
No, I know it is. But you know what I mean?
You're the only one.
Can you guys address that? Just how do you deal with the fact that you're listening to so much
The
stuff?
pure volume and having,
and you
having
have
so
to-
many different writers and each one sending.
I want you
their-
to listen to my 10
Yeah,
songs.
yeah.
Well, I'm maybe in a different position than maybe some other people, but I've been fortunate that I do have maybe 5 key writers that I deal with pretty regularly. So the volume's not too crazy, but I think I think even with 5 people, that's still too many people. That's still a lot of people. But in some ways, it's kind of good because the songs that you love, they hit you almost immediately. So you kind of, at least for me, like I can kind of know listening through a song, like, okay, I like this, but I don't, it's not connecting with me, or, you know, and I can kind of move through them that way. And then when I do hear something that I love, I'm like a repeat listener. I'll listen to it like 50 times, you know, and that's sort of the sign that I am super psyched on something. But
and you're right, not in that something is a perfect hit,
yeah,
that researches perfectly, but when you do hear a lot of songs, or at least, you know, you say this is special, it ends up being special in some way. Yeah.
Like there's definitely times when like there's been songs that Jack has done to me, like Brave's a good example of like hearing that song for the first time and it's like, oh, this is like the most special song. Everything is right about this song. Like everything works, everything Sarah's saying works, how she's singing it works, how you guys wrote the melodies. It just like it really didn't change. It didn't change one bit.
No, yeah.
You know, and
but you're hearing that on a day when you've listened to like 12 other songs, you know,
yeah.
Like,
and it's exciting because some days you listen to 20 songs and you don't hear anything that's special because it's hard to write a special song.
Do you ever like hear a song for the first time when you've heard 20 songs that day, and then like, because I know that I've sent things to people and like I don't get a response or they don't like it, and I'm like, I really feel like there's something special about this, and then I'll send it again and they still want, and then like one day someone will be like, this is great, and I'm like, well, okay, so
your state of mind is gonna affect it. So we listen every day.
Do you ever like? Are you ever like, wow, how did I miss that? Or are you ever like, or something will blow up that you passed on where you're like, oh, I didn't like it, and then it blows up and you're like,
or it comes on your random iTunes and you go, fuck, that song's amazing. Mm-hmm. But also like, so you know, our company, and I'm sure everyone's similar. We have people. I'm surrounded with people that are, you know, I think are experts at different styles of music. So sometimes it'll be somebody who works with me, Maria, Ashley, Markel, Hannah, Connor, will play a song and say, you got to hear this song. Or I'll hear it and go, I think this is fucking great. And I'll ask someone else to listen to it. And we kind of get a little bit of a group, like, but when we sit every week, twice a week, and listen as a group, and we're just like this, waiting to hear something, to just, you know, I mean, we're all inspired by great songs. So,
yeah, I think Scott. So I think Jen's right too. I mean, we all work with a team of people, and yes, you do miss stuff. Yes, you get an immediate visceral feeling, and it's part of the gig. It's why we do what we do. And there's actually no creative rule book for us either. It's just that we're all fans, and you know, I mean, and again, we are all fortunate that we work with another great group of people on our side of the fence, and we share and we support each other, and thank God we don't all have the same taste, you know. But that's our gig.
When you guys as a writer, I don't know if you guys have, I don't really get writer's block because I do it every day. And whether it's good or not is a whole other conversation, but I certainly can write every day. You know, when you guys go through sort of the down parts, you know, it's impossible to follow, you know, you're not writing someone like you every day, even if you'd like to. You're not writing California.
My
Girls
mind,
every
I am.
day. You're not doing something nice. Yeah, right. You think yeah, for sure.
I've done it again.
Yeah. I mean, in a session, you're always like, oh man, I love this. This is really good. I just heard one back the other day. Chorus is pretty good. Verse, all right. Pre-chorus could just bury it. I mean, it's just the worst thing. But in the moment, I was like, nah, man, that's a good choice. Let's go with that. That thing's huge. And I'm thinking like it's a lottery ticket. I just scratched off a winner, you know? It's a little weird. It is a little bit of a lottery. I mean, I think it's a controlled lottery, but, you know, you think you know, but...
It's so funny. Songs can change for me depending on who I'm playing it for. They sound completely different when someone is there listening to it than when I'm by myself or when it's someone else listening. And as far as writer's block goes, a big lesson I've learned just in this past year is that overwriting is so bad for me, and taking time off is should be a requirement of the job, because I can write a song every day. I'll never be able to go in a room and be like, oh, I can't think of any words or melodies. I can always write a song, but do I give a shit? And is anyone else gonna? And
what makes that special? When you're writing every day, it's hard to make that song pop out, and we have a good gauge on whether it's actually a good song, and still our batting average isn't amazing.
Yeah, but everybody needs a holiday.
Right. Well, the Swedes take off 2 months every summer, and or 3 months, and the Norwegians, they take off a couple months, and we're all fucking working every day.
Yeah. Well, I think
the American ethic.
It's true.
I think that a lot of things are great that when we think they're great, and then it's just whether they get married correctly with, when you sing a melody and you think it's great, I really think it's great a lot of the time, but for it to get connected with the perfect lyric and the perfect production, how many times have you had a song and you're like, this is cool, and then the way it's produced, it just comes to life. There's so many factors, and I really think that's what's so terrifying about this kind of work is there's no way of doing it. Everyone here has worked on a song for 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, 2 years at some point in your life, and then had an idea one morning in 10 minutes that was better than that entire thing. You don't know when it comes and why it comes, and you don't know what two things, how many times have you sewed something together that had nothing to do with each other, and then it happens. I do think that they're all, I think that you get to a point where you know what's interesting, and then you just do it forever, and that's why it's hard to take time off, because it can happen at any point. So if you didn't go to the studio this day, I was working with someone, there's 3 people recently, we were working together, and one person got very sick and canceled. And I was like, great, I'll take the day off. Then I called the other person. I was like, do you want to just go in for an hour? And we went in and we wrote a song. This is recently that is without a doubt one of the most important songs to me ever. I don't know if it'll mean that way for my career. Personally, it absolutely is. What the fuck? What if I didn't go in that day? What days did I not go in, and what did I miss out on? That drives you crazy.
The FOMO.
Jack
Will fuck you
literally
up.
will only stop if he's in the hospital, or
he's writing in the hospital. He loves that.
He probably is writing in the hospital, but
then you have to get better.
But he gets better.
Okay, keep going. Keep going.
Way to go.
Sorry.
But that's a burden that I think is part of it. So why are we so lucky that we get to write songs and expect people to fuck money, pay for the song, put their emotions into the song? It's a huge responsibility, right? So sometimes you have this feeling where well, the least I could do is ruin my life. And then sometimes you start ruining your life and your partner hates you or whatever it is. And you're like, no, there's a balance here. And by ruining my life, I'm not writing as good songs. So it's just, for me, and I'm sure all you guys, it's a really delicate thing. And I think that you have to go a certain level hard at it and try to stay sane. But doesn't that torture you? What if I didn't?
I have a picture that I got in my mind. First of all, Bonnie, I like this thing about when you play the song for someone. This happens to me where I'll play someone a song, and before they can say anything, I'll be like, okay, I know what to do. Just playing it for you has solved all my problems, and you don't have to say anything. It's amazing. And then the other thing I was going to say is I have this image that I got a bunch of years ago, 5 years ago, and it's kind of tortured me since, and I kind of wish I hadn't thought of it, but actually I'm going to tell you guys, so in a way, maybe that isn't so nice, but I'm not sure. I suddenly thought of my creativity as this really nice fountain way in the back of my mind. Way in the back. It's this fountain that's always bubbling, and there's always beautiful kind of sparkly water coming out of it, and it's just peaceful and it's always flowing. And then when I thought of that, I was so happy. And then I had the thing you're talking about, Jack. I realized I should be back there at the fountain more. I need to go there all the time. I have FOMO about the back of my own mind. I'm missing out on the chance of being in my own head.
There's nothing better, right? When you're there. So how often?
That's the best.
How often do you have periods of time where you're really there? Because most of the time you're here, and then every once in a while you'll just be like, I'm in it, I'm doing it. A few days, and you're like, it all makes sense. The past year, it all fucking makes sense right now. And you often do the best work in that moment. God forbid you're on vacation then,
Yeah, the biggest song I've ever had at radio came from being kicked out of a studio, writing at a piano in the middle of a lobby, and I just happened to be recording it, and 12 minutes into it, I was trying to write an Adele song because I just heard Send My Love, and this was 3 years ago, and I'm trying to write this, and I get into it, and it's like this terrible emotive like crap with really dark chords, and slowly falls into like Scott will make fun of me for it, but going into it, and it's just saying like, I hear a knock on the door and the night begins, and I just wrote My House as a ballad, and that's like, and it really was supposed to be like an Adele.
Yeah,
I thought, like, I totally missed the mark.
Adele in Florida have a lot of.
It's ridiculous.
I love the ballad, then just speed it the fuck up. That's the whole 80s.
Yeah, you do that.
Yeah.
You drop it down in auto tune. You put 4 Mint on it. I sound identical to Flo Rida, and there you go.
We're all gonna.
Hardest thing to write, an up tempo, Ross.
Yeah, it is. All right. On that note. If you were to ask me, I would say, and I say this behind your backs, Someone Like You, Teenage Dream, and We Are Young, in my opinion, are 3 of the best songs ever written in my life. So as a fan more than a host, thank you guys for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to the first season of And the Writer Is. If you want to go back and listen to earlier episodes, they're still on iTunes, or you can look at our website, www.andthewriteris.com. And for more information for the second season, follow us on our socials, whether it's from Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Our handles are @andthewriteris. Now, this next season coming up is going to be amazing, and it will be released this fall. So stay tuned, and on behalf of all the people involved with And the Writer Is, we thank you for sharing, and we thank you for listening. Till next time, I'm your host, Ross Golan.